Hey, this is Nicholas. Let's talk about Chinese medicine and why it's so difficult, especially in your first year. So this is a pep talk I usually give to my first year students, and it goes like this. Chinese medicine is difficult. Now my background is in mathematics, and math is pretty simple. It's a very linear, step-by-step process. You start out with something simple, and once you learn that and feel comfortable with it, you move on to something slightly more complicated. Then you hang out there, and when you feel like you've got it, you move on to the next step. And this is what makes it easy. There's a very clear roadmap, and you can kind of pause at each step along the way to make sure you really know what's going on. But that's not how Chinese medicine is. Chinese medicine is not a linear step-by-step process, because in Chinese medicine, we're not emphasizing functional entities, we're emphasizing the functional relationships between entities. And so what that means is, we can't talk about one thing without talking about everything else at the same time. So that gives us a problem of, where do we even start? So you may have noticed this in your OM theory classes. For example, when you talk about the heart, you can't just talk about the functions of the heart, you have to talk about how the heart relates to all the other organs in the body. So the heart stands in an interior-exterior relationship to the small intestine, so we can have heart heat pouring into the small intestine. The heart is supported by the Mingmen fire of the kidney, so these two have to communicate harmoniously, otherwise you might end up with Shen problems. And then the heart governs the blood, but it's the spleen that manages the blood. And so what's the difference between governing the blood and managing the blood? But then it's the liver that actually stores the blood, but blood is the mother of qi, and qi is the commander of the blood, and so what does that even mean? But blood and essence share the same source. So now we're back to the kidney. And then, to top it all off, you have 3 different textbooks, and each one of them translates the word chongmai differently. So the point is, this is not an easy medicine to learn. Chinese medicine is not a step-by-step process that you can break down into manageable chunks. If we wanted to make an analogy, we could say that Chinese medicine is more like a picture that gradually comes into focus. So what this means is, for the first year or two, you're going to be in a state of constant confusion, because you're looking at a fuzzy picture. So if you feel confused, or if you feel like this is all too complex and you have no idea what's going on, that's okay. That's completely normal. In fact, if you didn't feel that way, I'd be a little bit worried. So for now, just stick with it, try to get comfortable being confused, and have faith that after a year and a half or 2 years, this will all start to make sense. What this also means is, if you feel like you don't completely understand something, you can't dwell on it. You have to keep moving. Sometimes students will look at that fuzzy picture and try to zoom in on one particular area, and that's not how it works. This isn't like math, where you wait until you understand one step before you move on to the next. In Chinese medicine, in order to understand that one piece, you have to build a context around it. So you have to let the other pieces of the picture come into focus first. So if you don't understand that one particular thing, just keep moving. Eventually you can come back to it and it'll make more sense. So again, if you feel like you're really confused all the time, that's okay, that's normal, just keep moving. The other thing to keep in mind is how the curriculum is structured. Generally, acupuncture programs are divided into thirds. For the first third of the program, you're learning channels and points, you're learning your individual herbs, and you're learning your OM theory. Once you get to the second third, you're learning point prescriptions, you're learning formulas instead of single herbs, and you move on from theory to diagnosis and treatment. In the last part, you're learning formula modifications, you're finishing up your diagnosis and treatment, and the bulk of your time is spent in the clinic actually treating patients. So the point here is, the first third of your program is all about memorizing stuff. There are 361 points on the 14 channels, you learn about 280 single herbs, and then you have all of your anatomy and physiology on top of that. So you might say it's kind of like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hose. So if you're in your first year and you feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information, or if you feel like you're just memorizing a bunch of stuff and you have no idea what it means, that's okay. That's normal. In fact, if you didn't feel that way, I'd be a little bit worried. So it's really common that when students get to the end of their first year, they say, I feel like I have all of this information and I have no idea what to do with it. And that's pretty normal. We just have to throw all this information at you up front, but then when you get to your second year, you start to sift through it and try to understand it. And more importantly, you start applying it to clinical situations. So the gist of all of this is, if you feel confused, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like none of this makes any sense and it never will, that's normal. Just try to stick with it, try to keep moving, and eventually things will start to make sense. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to start making some more videos with study tips. I'll link them here and in the description below once they're up. But I wanted to start with the number one most important tip, which is don't panic, don't freak out, you're going to be okay, we're all going to make it. So I hope this is helpful because that's all for today. Thanks and see you next time.